Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukam Bhattvadvigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamedhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Good morning, everyone. Our topic this morning is the final act of the play. August 16th, 1886. This was 134 years ago. The curtain fell on the final act of the play of Sri Ramakrishna's life. Now, this is not something which we observe or commemorate. It is not the tradition of our order. There won't be any special puja or anything. But when I saw the date, then it occurred to me that the final days of Sri Ramakrishna's life are very, very important and very interesting. It's a topic that can be discussed anytime. But I would be lying if I said that it was pure coincidence that I'm speaking about it today, because this is the anniversary of the, as I say, the coming down of the curtain of the final act of his play. And this idea of Leela with regard to Sri Ramakrishna just seemed very much appropriate. We find the same thing in the life of Chaitanya Deva. If you read the biographies of his life, you'll find that they also break it down into the different acts of a play. So there'll also be the Antya Leela in his life. We will come across this title, Antya Leela, with regard to mostly the Kashipur days of Thakur's life. So in any event, I wanted to discuss this. For some reason, it's overlooked a little bit. And when we look at the literature, first of all, when we read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, we find that there are many, many gaps, almost months go by, where we don't have any recorded visits. And we know that M went practically every day to see Sri Ramakrishna during this period. There were a couple of breaks. He went on pilgrimage with his wife, I believe, to Darjeeling one time, and Thakur also wanted him to go to Puri. Aside from that, he went virtually every day, and one of his jobs was to carry news of Sri Ramakrishna's condition to the doctors that were seeing him. It was very often Dr. Sharkar, and sometimes he would go and they would come back together. They would go in the same carriage and everything. And he would tell him many times even how much blood he lost that day. It was a very terrible disease. This is one of the reasons I think that nobody has written about it so much. The throat cancer and with the hemorrhaging and everything. And apparently at the end it even spread. They think tumors in his shoulder and everything. So we don't read much about it. But M kept notes. And our Swami Prabhanandaji, one of the senior vice president of the order, who was a great historian of our order. He's done tremendous work. He's written so many books. And also a wonderful sadhu. I know him very well. He came here one time. Some of you may remember. He wrote a book called Antya Leela, about this final period of Sri Ramakrishna's life. It's in Bengali, but he wrote an English book also. What is it called? It's called, I think, more about Sri Ramakrishna, more about Ramakrishna. And there's one chapter there also, in English, of course, devoted to this final period. And Swami Atmajnanananda also, he has a very beautiful book on M. Mahendranath Gupta, the recorder of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And there's one chapter devoted to this, which is based almost entirely on this Antya Leela book that was written by Swami Prabhanandaji. So we get a lot of information. Swami Prabhanandaji he approached M's family because they very jealously guard the journal, M's journal. It doesn't belong to the order, it belongs to the family. And somehow he convinced them to let him have it for a certain period of time. So he went through, most of it is a little bit cryptic, but he could figure out most of it, and recorded all of the important events that took place during that time. So we do have some record of this. Swami Sharadananda, he also doesn't spend nearly as much time on this final portion of Thakur's life as he does his time of sadhana and other things. So there are reasons, of course. It was very painful for the devotees to have to observe this and watch this, and for us to even think about it. And we don't observe this passing away because we don't really feel that these great souls, that their passing away is really the end of something. Of course, they're passing away from our view. But this may be another reason, but for whatever reason, it isn't discussed as much as I think it should be, because it's very important. It gives us a very clear understanding of what took place. Many things took place during this final period that helped cement things that started earlier. So I'll go through some of these things, and the importance of this period, which I'll call this final act of the play of Sri Ramakrishna's life. There are different types of literary theories that we have about what constitutes a good play or a good novel. There was someone by the name of Freytag, maybe German, huh? Freytag. And there's something which is called, Freytag or Freytag, I don't know. It's a pyramid, and it explains a story in terms of building up to a certain climax and then winding down. This winding down time, he calls it dénouement. It's a French term. It means untying the knot. And this is when it's untying the knot, but it's also tying up loose ends. When all the big action is done, but then people would sometimes think, oh, but what happened to this character and that, and with any significance to this, and what was this all? So that's the dénouement period. And we find that that period, exactly, all of these things are taking place, especially during these Kashipur days. There's a very beautiful quote that I saw from Swami Nikhilananda about this three-act play of Thakur's life. He doesn't use those terms exactly, but he says, there's a liquid beauty in the rising sun. There's a royal splendor in its midday blaze, and there is also an exquisite grace in its setting glow. So it is with the life of a great man. There is sweetness in its childhood and adolescence. There is resplendence in its maturity. And again, there is deep pathos in its last days. So this was the case, of course, with Sri Ramakrishna. Now, how do we break down this life into these three acts? Of course, his childhood, we know, will be the first act. I would say when he came to Kolkata for the first time, stayed with his brother, Ram Kumar. They lived in the city at first, and then, of course, moved to Dakshineshwar. So mostly this Dakshineshwar period, that will be the second act. And when he did all of his spiritual practices, and when the devotees starting to come, and then this final act will be when he left Dakshineshwar. So this third act, I want to start with a very significant event that took place. We read in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. This will be the end of Act 2. So this transitional time period before the end of Act 2, the beginning of Act 3. This is April 24th, 1885. Sri Ramakrishna was at the house of his beloved disciple Balaram Bose. Balaram, of course, plays a very important role. Thakur stayed in his house, they say, 100 times, more than any other place in Calcutta. So M went to see him. This was around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Sri Ramakrishna said to M, "Are you well? I am feeling rather uneasy. I have a sore in my throat. I suffer very much during the early hours of the morning. Can you tell me how I may be cured? Now, this may be the earliest reference we have to Thakur talking about some pain in his throat, which of course we know became cancer eventually. At other times he complained that he would wake up, he had a foul taste in his mouth, had trouble swallowing different things, and he had his own theories. One time he blamed it on ice cream. That he said, a few days ago I ate a lot of ice cream. And then he used to like to take ice. He would chew on ice in the hot season. It would cool his throat and everything. There's a very nice story about how Shashi, Swami Ramakrishna, one time walked 6 miles in blazing heat with a huge thing of ice on his back to take to Sri Ramakrishna. So he blamed it, perhaps it was from taking too much ice. And then he had been to the festival of Panihati. He used to go every year. And this last time that he went, it was raining, and he was a little annoyed at Ram and others. He said, how could you let me go in that bad weather, that perhaps I caught a cold? So he had different theories in the beginning. He didn't think initially that it was something so terribly significant. But and then others thought that it was what they called clergyman's throat, or clergyman's disease. That meant that simply talking too much. That those who are ministers or something, constantly speaking, that they'll develop some chronic type of sore throat. So they tried different types of treatments, and nothing worked very well. And what began as just a scratchy throat and everything developed into a type of sore. We'll understand it today as a tumor, actually, as a malignant tumor, but they developed into a type of sore, and eventually it started to hemorrhage. Then they knew that something was very serious, and we find that on December 29th, 1885, this will be much later, this will be after he's in Kashipur, Dr. Sharkar, who became his main physician, for the first time diagnosed it as cancer. We don't really see that until almost the very end of 1885. And he understood it to be incurable. And at that time, of course, it was. Now, by Thakur's grace, many types of cancer can be at least put into remission. So, this is towards the end of that second phase of his life. The exact end, I would say we can put it September 26th, 1885. And this is 5 months, so he went 5 months. 5 months? April, May, June, July, was that 5 months? After that initial experience of pain and dryness and that bad taste in his mouth, when the devotees finally felt that they had to move him to Kolkata, so that the devotees, because they knew that they would have to be serving him more often, and to take doctors out there, Dakshineshwar was a bit out of the way. So they thought if he's in Kolkata, they can easily see him and he can get better treatment there. So they decided that they would move him. So he left Dakshineshwar, never went back. I read so many interesting things that I hadn't known before, that at one time later it was proposed that he move back to Dakshineshwar towards the end, and they didn't allow it. There's the same son of Mathur Babu, Trailokiyanath, who also didn't give the Holy Mother her a stipend and things. Anyhow, that's a different story. But so he never went back to Dakshineshwar after this. So these were the two reasons. He could get better treatment, and the devotees could freely come, because all the householder devotees, they had their work to do and everything. They could come in the evenings mostly, or weekends. Now, we'll see that there are always going to be two sets of reasons for things that take place. One is what they're thinking. The other is the hidden meaning. And the hidden meaning is what's very interesting here, that this became an opportunity for all of the devotees to join together and to form a very close bond, even closer than before. And we'll see for all of the young boys to really form a brotherhood, and almost the beginning of the monastic order there. And it was a time for Sri Ramakrishna to reveal his true nature, his true mission, what he came for. So many different things came at that time. So all of this will constitute this final act of this play, is Antyalila, this denouement, untying the knot. And partly it's laying groundwork for what is to follow. That means the formation of the Ramakrishna order. It means also the very important role that Holy Mother will play in the order, and many, many other things. Training of Narendra, carrying Vedanta to the West, and many other things. So let me go through the history of it a little bit. We've gone through some of it, but so we see a few months, about 5 months after the initial pain in his throat, Sri Ramakrishna was moved to Kolkata. They had rented a small house in a very busy, crowded area of the city. The second Thakur saw it, he said, I won't stay there. And he went straight to Balaram Bose's house. So Balaram Bose kept him there for about a week, but it was a temporary type of thing. And in the meantime, they looked for some other place. So this is the September 26th, 1885. He stayed there for 7 days. And then they found a house in the neighborhood of Shambazar. Shampur. Shambazar. Shambazar. Yes. Shambazar. Okay. And this is now one of the centers of our order. It's a very nice place to visit. You can see where Thakur stayed in the Holy Mother's room, and it's some of our monks stay there and everything. So he stayed there. It was quite close to the houses of M and Balaram, and for the others it was also convenient. And he was there until early December. Now, we know about his disciple Mahimacharan Chakrabarti. He's mentioned many, many times in the Gospel. He is the one who found a more spacious place outside the city in a garden area where they thought Thakur would feel better. And he could walk around a little bit, get outside. And this was in a suburb of Kolkata called Kashipur. So now we know this as the Kashipur Garden House. The Thakur moved there on December 9th, 1885, and stayed there until his final Mahasamadhi on August 16th, 1886. Now, I want to go through some of the different elements of this final act, some very important questions and things that we can discuss a little bit. One, what was Sri Ramakrishna's own opinion regarding this fatal disease that he died from? We've seen already what he felt at the very beginning, but as it progressed, how did he feel about it? Was it a mere show? Now this is, of course, it doesn't seem like it in the beginning, but this was the opinion of some of his householder disciples, Ram especially, Ramchandra Datta, that somehow Thakur was doing this for his own hidden purpose, and that even once everything was done, that he would be fine again. They didn't really take it as ordinary illness. People in those days, even today, hesitant to think that how can an avatar or a great holy person suffer from a disease like that. So they had that type of idea. So was it a mere show? Did he really feel the pain? There's another thing. Some will say, no, maybe it appeared like it, but he really didn't experience the pain. And then, what was the reason for all of this? As I say, the hidden reason. We don't have to assume that he did it himself. And then, could he have cured it? Because this was another thing, that many of them had that firm conviction that if he put his mind on it, that he could have cured that disease. And then this question we've seen so many times: what was the deeper purpose of this? What were the ultimate results? What were the ramifications? What were the positive things that came out of this very painful final period of Sri Ramakrishna's life? So let's start with the disease. We see very clearly in the beginning that Thakur saw it simply as a disease, nothing special about it. He didn't know, he thought just a little sore throat, it'll pass, this and that. Many things happened to Thakur that he saw a deeper meaning. We can just point to one incident when he fell and broke his arm. Nothing to do with him wanting to do it, but he said, as if Mother is trying to show me this and explain this to me, and now to see God in all beings and not in ecstasy and everything. So he would ultimately see a deeper meaning. that why does he have this disease, that there's a deeper meaning behind it. So in the beginning, he thought it was nothing very dangerous, either a cold or just a sore throat, too much ice cream, too much ice, getting caught in the rain. Even the idea too much samadhi. This is later, he was warned very much. Dr. Sarkar used to say that. You go into samadhi, blood rushes up, and more blood will go to the throat. So this was another idea that they had. So in the beginning, he didn't take it too seriously. Later, he started to question, will I get better? He asked M. M was very tactful. He said, sir, it may take some time, this and that. But at some point, Sri Ramakrishna said, now I'm starting to believe that it's incurable. Because the word got out, Dr. Sarkar told people and everything. So he started to really believe that. Now, we'll find that Sri Ramakrishna not only had certain beliefs about this final portion of his life, but made many statements. And it's very interesting how prophetic these were. That many of them really, almost to the letter, came true. He had some presentiment that he would be unable to swallow solid food toward the end of his life. And it had nothing to do at that time with thinking that I'll get some throat problem or cancer. Just, he had that idea that he would end up living what in the gospel we read as farina pudding, the shuji payas. And we see that it actually happened. On December 23rd, 1885, this is from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, he said, it was revealed to me in a vision, we don't know how much earlier, but it was revealed to me in a vision that during my last days I should have to live on pudding. During my present illness, my wife, Holy Mother, my wife was one day feeding me with pudding. I burst into tears and said, is this my living on pudding near the end, and so painfully? Then he talked about when you find me spending nights in Kolkata and mixing with all different people, eating with all different types of people, and starting to give the teachings away freely, that these will be signs that the end is nearing. He said to M on March 11th, 1886, if the body were to be preserved a few more days, many people would have their spirituality awakened. Then after a few minutes he continued, but this is not to be. This time the body will not be preserved. So by then, and this is just a few months before passing, he knew the end was coming. Then after a pause, such is not the will of God. This time the body will not be preserved, lest, finding me guileless and foolish, people should take advantage of me, and lest I, guileless and foolish as I am, should give away everything to everybody. In this Kali Yuga, you see, people are averse to meditation and japa. Sri Ramakrishna used to give the illustration of a weekly market, hat, what they call a hat. I saw this in many parts of the world. It's very interesting. I saw it with the Bedouin markets in the Mideast. I saw it in Afghanistan. There'll be some big empty open field, and once a week, a Saturday or a Sunday, depending on the country, that all the people from the countryside would come, and they would bring their wares or goods or produce, whatever it was, and they would set up a little bazaar. They would either tents or little stalls, something like that, and they would sell all of their wares, and at the end of the day, they would take everything down and leave. So Thakur used to say in the beginning, people would come and they would bargain, they would haggle over different things. Try to get the best price, and the shopkeepers would try to make the most money. And so if you went in early in the day, you may not get exactly what you want, or you may not get a very good price. The longer you wait, you go towards the end, and they're starting to get anxious. They don't want to take anything back with them. They want to give everything away. So they lower the price a little bit. And then he says, if you go to the very end of the day, they may give things away. Freely give everything away. When you see them giving everything away, then you know that hat bhenge jabe. Bhanga hat, they use that expression. Bhanga hat, it'll be dismantled. That'll be the end of the whole thing. So this is what happened in Thakur's life. He was a little stingy with regard to who he would accept as disciples. Not like Holy Mother in the very beginning. But towards the end, he started bestowing his grace on everyone. And of course, we see this most vividly on that January 1st day of 1886, which we know as Kalpataru Day, when so many householder devotees, disciples had come. It was, of course, a holiday, this January 1st, and Sri Ramakrishna felt better that day. He came down from his room after a long time. Otherwise, he just stayed in his room. He didn't have the strength, but he came down to his room, and we know he blessed everybody. One or two exceptions. He said, the time is not right for you, but otherwise he blessed everyone. He used Chaitanno Hok, and it would touch them, and they all had different various types of spiritual experiences. Things that in the beginning, we only find him doing for very intimate disciples, his future monastic disciples, maybe even the householders we don't hear too much. But that day very freely gave everything away, and suffered very much the next day also. After that, he had a little bit of a relapse after all of that. But he didn't give everything away. He saved all the important stuff for his Narendra, his Loren, his chief disciple, and we'll get to that later. That at the very end, he turned everything over to him. Whatever he had, that became the possession of our future Swami Vivekananda. There were other signs that this market was about to be dismantled. Sri Ramakrishna said that now his mind was going towards the formless, whereas previously everything was Divine Mother. Mind was going toward the formless, and he was seeing God everywhere and in everyone. So these were a few of the little hints, these little indications that he didn't even see individuals anymore or things anymore. He said, like looking at artificial fruit, everything made of wax, I see everything chinmaya, everything made of consciousness. I look and see everybody sitting there. I see Latu sitting with his chin on his hand. I see no one but Rama. Rama himself is sitting there like that. So these were all signs that he was entering that final stage. On December 23rd, 1885, this is a week before Kalpataru, he was sitting in his room in Kashipur and went into a deep state of samadhi. After coming down, he said to M, I saw everything passing from form to formlessness. I want to tell you all the things I saw, but I cannot. Well, this tendency of mine toward the formless is only a sign of my nearing dissolution, isn't it? Then he continued, even now I am seeing the formless, indivisible Satchidananda, just like that. But I have suppressed my feeling with great difficulty. Then looking at M, what you said about the sifting of disciples was right. This was another one of his theories. This illness is showing who belongs to the inner circle and who to the outer. Those who are here renouncing the world belong to the inner circle, and those who pay occasional visits and ask, how are you, sir, belong to the outer circle. So what did Sri Ramakrishna really think of this disease? Was it just some natural thing, hidden purpose? Was it the Divine Mother who wanted it to happen? It's a controversial question only because there were different schools. Not so much that he was confused about it, but some of the householders, Ramchandra Datta especially, Girish probably also to a certain extent, were one school that believed that Thakur could do anything, that he could cure it himself, that he only did it for this hidden purpose, to separate inner circle, outer circle, all of these things, that it wasn't anything real. Then the other school, led mostly by Narendra, and it's interesting, they're two relatives. You know that Ramchandra Datta and Narendra also Datta, I don't know how closely they were related, just some type of uncle or cousin, something like that. Anyhow, he believed that, look, Thakur has a human body. Thakur used to say that also. It'll be subject to disease. It'll die of something. So he took a more scientific type of view of all of these things. So there was this group who thought it was a bit of a ruse, a bit of a sham, that Thakur had his mysterious reason for it, and when he had accomplished what he wanted, he would cure himself. Then there were others who believed that, well, it's really a disease, but Thakur, through his yogic power, can cure himself. So they would beg him, either fix your mind on the throat and cure it that way, or talk to the Divine Mother. Mother will cure it for you if you ask her. So a couple of times, Thakur was so simple. He would say, Mother, they're asking me to do this, so let me ask you, can you at least make this body to hold it together a little bit? I went to the Asiatic Museum and saw that they had these fossils of dinosaurs and they keep the bones together with wire. Can you at least do that much to keep the body together so I can take a little food? And then he said, and then Mother scolded me, you're eating through so many mouths, you're only thinking of this one. Huh? And then other times he would say, you're asking me to put the mind on this body, this mind that has been given to the feet of the Divine Mother. I can never do that. So could he have done it? I won't say that he couldn't have done it, but could he have cured himself and kept himself free from disease forever? No, the body has to go sooner or later, even the body of a divine incarnation. And this actually was one of the things, we'll get to that Thakur really believed, that the divine incarnation has a human body, like everybody else. So we'll get to that. Why did he get this terrible disease? Yeah, this is the question that we're talking about now. You want to know my belief? Sushil? Tobacco. He smoked tobacco. Let's be scientific people. Huh? He had a human body. Tobacco, we know, causes cancer in the throat. Possible. If it hadn't been this, he would have died from something. We say Swamiji. Why did Swamiji get diabetes and other things? He had a human body. He had to get something. Cancer, we know tobacco is causing cancer. There'll be other types of explanations. Huh? We'll bring in karma and all sorts of things. But just from that point of view. So Thakur's attitude seems to have been that the Divine Mother ordained that it would be this way. Maybe not specifically that way, but that he would have this disease, that it would serve a purpose, that he was convinced that it served a purpose. Otherwise, he could have passed away in samadhi at any time, or he could have died in his sleep. Why did he have to go through over a year of suffering? Huh? So there was a reason. He fully believed that in order to get her work done. So one of this was to separate these casual visitors from others. We heard that before. He said, this is August 9th, 1885, just before leaving Dakshineshwar for Kolkata, he said to the devotees, now there is no outer manifestation of divinity. That means he appears like an ordinary person with a disease that keeps the weeds away. So he had this other theory, that there'll be many people who say, how can he be a holy man if he gets a disease, ordinary disease like everybody else? Now there is no outer manifestation of divinity that keeps the weeds away. Only genuine devotees will remain with me now. Do you know why I have this illness? Okay. It has the same significance. Those whose devotion to me has a selfish motive behind it will run away at the sight of my illness. Okay, so separating is antaranga from bahiranga. Huh? It's the inner circle from the outer circle. And then to forge this future monastic brotherhood. This is another thing that he believed. And to establish Narendra. All of these things took place in Kashipur. That's why it was so important. As the unquestioned leader of the young monks, he knew that Swamiji would be the one that would hold everything together, and that Holy Mother would be the future spiritual guide of the whole movement, and the one to initiate so many people. All of these things, perhaps they could have taken place, but not in the same way that they did without this final play. All of these took place in Kashipur. So he saw a hidden significance. It does not mean that he didn't think the disease was real and a physical disease, but he saw a deeper meaning behind it. So it wasn't his trick. It was the Divine Mother's trick, if anybody's trick. This is how he saw it. And whatever the cause, he saw that there were positive results. Some very important things came out of this period of his life. So Thakur, he had a very strong conviction that the avatar lives in the world, has a body like everybody else, even behaves like other people, experiences emotions like ordinary people, has a mind like ordinary people, at the same time completely different. Can rise above, and we know there's no comparison between Sri Ramakrishna and others, but on another level, that these great souls are capable of grief and anger and emotions and ups and downs, this and that, not the same way that we are, but partly to show. And if we didn't see this human aspect, then we wouldn't be able to relate to them that way. Sri Ramakrishna was very fond of an expression, Poncho bhuter fande, brahmo pore kande. We find it at least 4 times in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. It says, even Brahman weeps, caught in the snares of the 5 elements. What is the snare of the 5 elements? The human body. So this means that when Brahman falls into the snare, that means when the infinite absolute Brahman takes human birth, then he's subject to all of the human emotions. And Thakur used to say that this is part of the mystery of the avatar, how they have this human side. He quoted these lines again on December 22nd, 1883, so well before his illness. He was explaining to M the mystery of the avatar. He said, not all by any means can recognize an incarnation of God. Assuming a human body, the incarnation falls a victim to disease, grief, hunger, thirst, and all such things like ordinary mortals. Rama wept for Sita. Brahman weeps entrapped in the snare of the 5 elements, that same expression. Then he goes on, he tells the story of the incarnation Varaha. Varaha is the boar. In Thakur's story, somehow this boar becomes a sow. Did anyone ever notice that? Because after Vishnu takes birth as the boar, he has to kill the demon Hiranyaksha. And then Thakur says after that, I don't know where this story is from, he lived happily with the piglets, nursing and lying in the mud, wallowing in the mud, with the piglets nursing and feeling great joy and peace and happiness and everything. Can you imagine? This is the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Brahman, Vishnu, completely forgetting everything, taking human birth, forgetting everything about divine nature, all of that, under the sway of Maya. There has to be some Maya covering even the divine incarnation in order for him or her to take human birth. So the gods didn't know what to do. Where is Vishnu? He's not coming back. He'd rather live in the mud with his little piglets, or her piglets, nursing them. So finally Shiva, he said he went down to earth, he took his trident, and he pierced the body of the sow, and then Vishnu came out and he with a big laugh, went back to his own abode, remembering who he was and everything. So, as I say, Sri Ramakrishna mentioned this several times. There was another time, August 28th, 1885, when he's speaking to M. And this is, of course, after he has his illness. M had asked him why he had this illness. And, Sri Ramakrishna asked M. See, he was simple. He may have his own theories, but he's asking M, why did I get this illness? So M said, people will not have the courage to approach you unless you resemble them in all respects. But they are amazed to find that in spite of such illness, you don't know anything but God. Then Sri Ramakrishna replied. Balaram also said, if even you can be ill, then why should we wonder about our own illness? Lakshmana was amazed to see that Rama could not lift his bow on account of his grief for Sita. Even Brahman weeps entangled in the snare of the 5 elements. And very often he would say that even Rama wept for Sita. So very clear here that he's referring to his own illness. Even if he also, as an incarnation of God, why won't he also have an illness like this that others might have? Now, this doesn't mean that he didn't have some other theories. And the one thing that we hear about very often is that he either had this illness or it got worse because of it taking on the karma of his disciples and devotees. This is something that we reserve almost for the very, very high souls. The ordinary gurus, they may to a certain extent, they may not, but the higher we get, the more we see that they have this power to relieve others of their bad karma. This was, of course, this is one of the main ideas behind the crucifixion of Christ, that he did it to remove the sins of all mankind, the original sin and everything, with the excruciating pain on the cross. So Thakur, he felt that, and on different occasions specifically mentioned Girish Ghosh. You see this illness because of the sins of Girish Ghosh, all of the things that he did, that Thakur, out of his compassion, eliminated that, removed that. How else could all of these disciples have all these experiences and everything? So this was another idea that Thakur had, that part of the reason why he had this disease was because he had taken on the bad karma of all of his disciples and devotees. Now, the question, was it painful? On some level, it had to be horribly painful. We've already seen that even the avatar will have a human body and experience things like that. Yet at other times, Sri Ramakrishna seemed to be perfectly free from pain. It could rise above it. When we look at all of the statements regarding his illness, we have to conclude that when he was in the ordinary state of consciousness, of course he felt the pain. And it was very, 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 very painful. In fact, we can say that Thakur probably had a very low threshold of pain. Because he used to complain about the smallest things. One day they came and said, "Oh, look, I have these little, you press my leg, it's a little, fuliache."
That's because he was childlike.
Because he was childlike. Because he was childlike. But also when he broke his arm, he complained so much, how much it hurts. Of course it did hurt. But anyhow, the point is that he could feel pain. We know that. And the different statements that he made. And some of these you won't have heard before because these weren't recorded in the Gospel. This is thanks to our Swami Prabhanandaji. October 6th, 1885, he said, "My throat feels as if it is cracking. It feels as if someone were piercing my throat with a knife." And then in another place, I don't remember, it's something like, "It feels like the scalding water is being poured in my throat." So it was terribly painful. There's one statement that is very well known that he said to M, "I'm bearing all of this cheerfully, for otherwise you would be weeping. If you all say that it is better that the body should go rather than suffer this torture, suffer this torture, I am willing." Now, this is when Sri Ramakrishna was on the ordinary plane of consciousness. There are many times when he's talking about Chaitanya Deva, that he says Chaitanya Deva had three different states. That in the highest state, he would be lost in samadhi. Not aware of anything, not aware of the external world, not aware of the body. If there's pain in the body, he wouldn't feel it at all. Mind comes down a little bit, and he's in some divine mood. Aware of things and everything, but not in the ordinary state of consciousness. And then he comes down further, and he can converse with others, he can sing and dance and do kirtan and all of that. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, whenever he would talk about Chaitanya Deva, and would say to himself, is he really telling us about his own three moods? And because he also had the same things. So we can say that when Thakur was in that state of samadhi, there was no question of feeling pain. He wasn't aware of anything. But we see when he came down from that state, so this in-between state, he comes down from that state, very often he would say, and now everything is all right. Now I don't feel any pain. So he would come down to that in-between state also. He could be beyond that pain. Now there's also we can say the yogic state where the mind can be removed from it. Swami Turiyananda had that ability, some others. Thakur didn't seem to do that. This would be just this intoxication of that ecstasy of samadhi was so great that he forgot the pain. Then when he would come down again to that lower state, then he would show all signs of this excruciating pain. But there's one very important incident recorded in the Gospel, that his disciple Hari, later Swami Turiyananda, was there, and Thakur is saying about, oh, how painful this is and everything else, and Hari looks at him and he says, but sir, it seems to me that you're in a state of bliss. Huh? And then Sri Ramakrishna looked at him and says, the rascal found me out. Huh? So, what do we make of this? Did he not feel pain? Is it possible to be in a state of bliss and feel terrible pain at the same time? Yes, for Sri Ramakrishna. Why? Because he didn't identify. He didn't identify with the body the way that we do. You know, there's a verse from this Brihadarantika Upanishad, my favorite verse. And I was so happy I found that Swami Bhudeshanandaji Maharaj, whom I have the highest love and regard for, that it was his favorite verse also. This is Atmanam Chet Vijaniyat Ayam Asmiti Purushaha Kimichan Kasya Kamaya Shariram Anusam Jwaret. A very interesting verse. If one were to have this highest state of realization, where one knows I am the self, I am not the body, the mind, none of these things, then it asks a rhetorical question. Then for what reason, for what gain, desiring what, expecting what possible reason could there be for one to suffer along with the suffering of the body? Jwara means fever. Anusam jwaret. That the body has fever. Why should I have fever? I'm not the body. So Thakur could, the mind could be in that state of bliss and still feeling that pain of the body, but say, I'm not this. And I won't let it affect my mind. Thakur was very fond of this expression, I don't know, maybe from a song. He would say, let the body and its pain look after each other. Oh, my mind, you remain in bliss. He would say that very often. So I think that all of this is true, that he didn't suffer from that pain in his throat the way we would suffer from it. He felt it. He felt it, and it could be torturous at some times. But the mind was given to the feet of the Divine Mother. So it was different. There's, on some level, he could remain in that blissful state, but at the same time feel that pain of the body. Now, what about these other hidden purposes? This idea of this future monastic order. One very important event took place during this time. This was January 12th, 1886, Makara Sankranti. And another nice coincidence, Swamiji's birthday. Narendra was born Makara Sankranti. So the elder Gopal, later Swami Advaitananda, who was the only disciple who was older than Sri Ramakrishna, he came to Sri Ramakrishna and said, on the occasion of Makara Sankranti, I would like to distribute some Garwa cloth and Rudraksha beads to some wandering sadhus. People do things like that as a very nice way to get merit for yourself, or to do something for these sadhus and everything. And he wanted Sri Ramakrishna to bless him and to bless all of this, so he could do that. And then Thakur said, why are you going to give it to them? Give it to these young boys. Nobody knew anything at that time. Nobody had any idea that they'll all be these stalwart sannyasins. He said, give it to them. He said, each one of them, this is our Narendra, or Akal, or Yogin, or Baburam, all of them, Balaram, all of them, Baburam. He said, each one is equal to 1,000 monks. Can you imagine? So this is what happened, that the elder Gopal, he was very happily, he gave it there were 12 present. He had 12 sets. He gave 11 to them. One was kept in reserve for Girish at that time. But he gave them to them. Some of them, I don't know which ones, maybe Swami Shivananda, others, wore a Garawa, at least from time to time. Swamiji, maybe when he went to Gaya, maybe they wore Garawa at that time also. Some of the householder disciples criticized them also for it. What are you doing playing as monks and everything? They still looked upon them as just these young boys. So this was one thing that definitely took place. All of these young men, they took this vow of service to nurse Sri Ramakrishna around the clock. So always one of them was there. They did it by shifts. Only Shashi, of course, was there almost all the time, through the night and everything, for hours on end, fanning and everything. So this way they formed this very tight-knit feeling, this great bond of love between all of them. So this very much happened at that time. So we can almost say that this was really Sri Ramakrishna initiating the future Ramakrishna order. That the Ramakrishna order, in some respects, started in Kashipur, and the monastic life started with the receiving of this Garua cloth. Then he had to prepare Narendra for the future mission. And he knew that this monastic order would form, and he knew that his message would be carried far and wide. He had a very vivid dream at one time where he said he saw people speaking a different language which he couldn't understand, wearing clothes which looked a little different, and very fair complexion. And he saw them also worshipping me, he said, and accepting these teachings of Vedanta. So we told them all about it. And later, of course, we came to understand that this will be the Western countries, America, to some extent England and Europe also. So he had this conception in his mind. He knew. One time, of course, when he saw his photograph, he went into an ecstatic mood and said, this will be worshipped from house to house, throughout the world. He had that understanding. Specifically, he had to train up Narendra. This was the most important thing. And we know about his Nirvikalpa Samadhi, that was it a trick of Sri Ramakrishna's? A little bit. Because he went into this very deep state one day, and so deep that they thought, what has happened to him? Is he dying? Something happening? So again, our elder Gopal, he was there. And he went to Sri Ramakrishna and said, all of this is happening. We don't know what's happened to Narendra. And Thakur very calmly said, you see, he's been pestering me so long to have this experience. As if to say, I knew it and I'm responsible for it. Let him enjoy it for a little while. So that was his Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And then Narendra later came up to him. They had so many conversations. This was when Thakur asked him, what is your golden life? And Swamiji said, I want to remain in this state of samadhi, come down just to keep the body alive, take some food, go back. And Thakur scolded him, how small-minded of you. I thought you'll be a great banyan tree, you'll provide shade for so many people and do so much good in the world and everything. But this particular time, Sri Ramakrishna said to him, look, now Mother has shown you everything, but this gem that you've experienced, this will be kept in a box and it'll be locked. And I'll keep this key with me. You won't get it back until you finish Mother's work. Sometimes he would say Mother's work, sometimes he would say my work, like that. So this was an indication to Swamiji at that young age that he would have a burden on his shoulders, a great burden of carrying this message of Sri Ramakrishna and founding this monastic order, so many different things. Then we find also that during the final months of Sri Ramakrishna's life, when he could barely speak, this was another thing, that somehow he could get the energy and the fortitude to raise his mind above the disease sometimes. But when he could hardly speak, Narendra would sit by his side every day. And Thakur would give him very specific instructions. We don't know the details of these things, but very often Swamiji, when they would, brother disciples would say, you're doing this on your own. He said, no, it's Thakur's will. And he said, how do you know? He told me. And they all believed it, and they all knew it and understood it. Thakur made it very clear that you follow him, that whatever he says, that this is my will, that in the future I'll live through him. He gives this type of language. So during one of these occasions, when it was difficult for him to speak, Sri Ramakrishna wrote something down. He probably hadn't written in a long time. He used to draw. He liked to draw. there's another thing that I'd never seen before. They used to give him paper. He would draw sometimes. He drew a picture of a tiger and some other animals, the horse, something like that. Anyhow, on this occasion he wrote, and of course we have a copy, I don't know the original, but we had a photograph of his handwriting. It's very crude, like a small child, because he was practically illiterate. He knew how to write. Spelling is all wrong. The grammar is not good, but it's very sweet. He wrote in Bengali, Joy Radhe Premamoyi Noren Lok Shikha Dibe Jokon Ghore Baere Hak Dibe Joy Radhe. So literally, we read it in the English, Naren will teach others. But it says literally, victory to Radha, love personified. Naren will teach people when he causes a great commotion. Hak Dibe, both inside and outside. I mean, within India and throughout the whole world. Victory to Radha. Then he drew a picture of a face, which we take to be Narendra's face, and a peacock with the tail, which people seem to think is Narendra and his following. The tail behind would be all the people that following him. So then what did Narendra do? He said, no, I won't do it. He was interested in God realization and everything. He didn't see himself as a teacher or anything like that. And Thakur said, no, you will have to do it. Your very bones will make you do it. Then, and all of these very significant events, this was just right before Thakur's passing away. And this is in Narendra's own words, Swamiji's own words. He said, 2 or 3 days before leaving the body, he, Sri Ramakrishna, called me to his side one day and asking me to sit before him, looked steadfastly at me and fell into samadhi. Then I really felt that a subtle force, like an electric shock, was entering my body. In a little while I lost outward consciousness and sat motionless. How long I stayed in that condition I do not remember. When consciousness returned, I found Sri Ramakrishna telling me affectionately, and in some instances it says with tears in his eyes, tears of joy, we assume. Today I've given you my all. I've become a penniless beggar, a penniless fakir. With this power you are to do many good works for the welfare of the world before you return. That means to your own abode. Thakur saw him as one of the 7 rishis and all of that. Then, on one occasion, Swamiji saw Narendra, how Thakur was suffering like that. And just the thought flashed into his mind. Can he really, in the midst of all of this suffering, will he still be able to say that he's a divine incarnation? Only if he can do it now, in the midst of all of this, will I really believe it. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, of course, you couldn't think anything in front of him. He knew everything. He could read people's minds like that. So, he said to him, oh, my Naren, even now you have your doubts. And then the famous statement, he who was Rama, he who was Krishna, verily he is now Ramakrishna. Not simply in your Vedantic sense. That means don't simply think that God dwells within all beings, anybody can say it, in a special sense, as the divine incarnation. In Narendra, he had nothing more to say. He remained completely silent. I would say the final, most important, or one of the most important events, had to do with Sri Ramakrishna's vision regarding the future role of Holy Mother. Holy Mother, we know, was tremendously shy. She couldn't mix with people. She could barely be in the presence of people, had to be veiled, very often would speak through somebody else even. Too shy to speak directly to people. Yogan Ma or Golab Ma would speak for her, something like that. Anyhow, one day, Sri Ramakrishna was looking at her very intensely. And she asked, what are you thinking? And he said, look here, won't you do something? Won't you do anything? Must I do everything all by myself? Now it became clear he wasn't talking about making his bed and cooking his food or anything. He was talking about the purpose of his birth, to flood the world with spirituality. Holy Mother said, but what can I do? I am a mere woman. Sri Ramakrishna said, no, you will have to do many things. And he also prepared her in so many ways. We know about all of the things he said to Narendra day after day, but even with Holy Mother, even teaching her all of the different mantras, to how she can recognize which disciples should have which one and this and that. So he prepared her fully. And he knew that she would be the one to continue the work after he passed away. After all, she spent half of her life after he passed away. She was, 33 when he passed away. She lived to be 66. So she had so many years left, 67. She passed away in 1920. So many years left to carry on this mission with so many thousands of disciples also. So that final day finally came. I don't want to say too much about it, but August 16th, 1886, and Narendra was massaging Thakur's feet. And Thakur gave his very final instruction to him. He simply said, take care of the boys. He would tell them, don't let them go back home. Keep them together. Don't let them lead a worldly life. Let them renounce everything. Then he uttered the name of Kali 3 times in a very clear voice, and then laid down a little bit. Some of them left the room. Some of them had this feeling that they didn't want to bear this fact that he was passing away. Others felt that he had just entered into a state of samadhi, because he did so often. And when he was in that state of samadhi, very hard to tell if he was alive or dead. There's no sensation. Sometimes you couldn't tell if there was any breath, or you couldn't feel a heartbeat, anything like that. So there was a lot of confusion, and many of them felt this is a very deep state of samadhi. For hours and hours, they chanted some divine name of God, thinking that would bring his mind back down. They did things, they rubbed ghee on his back, all different types of things to bring him back down. But it started to dawn on them that this would be the very final one. And then Dr. Sharkar came the next day at noon, and then he officially declared that Thakur had passed away, that the play was over at this time. How and when he went from that Nirvikalpa Samadhi to Mahasamadhi, we can't really say, but they fixed that time of death is 1 o'clock in the morning. Now, one final thought about this denouement, that tying up all of the loose ends, sometimes they like to leave a few other loose ends. So there can be a sequel, there can be another play. There can be a little mystery behind the whole thing. And Sri Ramakrishna did this himself when he said, yes, perhaps I'll have to come again. And then using cryptic language. There's something called this Dasha Dikpalas, the 10 protectors of the directions. We have north, we have northeast, east, southeast, south, southwest, west, northwest, up and down. So there are 10 of them. And Vayu is the presiding deity of the northeast. So he said, I may have to come, Vayu Kone, in the direction of the northeast. We don't know what it means, or northwest, I'm sorry. We don't know what it means. Some people will say Punjab, some people will say Siberia, who knows? No idea what he meant. But at least he kept this, and he said that I may have to come back one more time. Sometimes he said in 100 years, sometimes he said in 200 years. So he kept this so that we can have a sequel to this play in the future. But the other thing we have to remember is that he assured Holy Mother on several occasions that don't think that my death is an ordinary type of death. I've simply moved from one room to another room, and that those who call on me, those with great love and devotion, that they can have the vision, they can feel my presence, that I'm still active in the world. This is also what the avatar does, not just the time on earth, but even other times. So, anyhow, I thought it would be a nice occasion to discuss these things. We shouldn't look at it really as anything depressing. This is also a glorious period. A glorious period. Let me read again, because I like it so much, that statement that Swami Atmajnanananda made. Don't go away, I'll find it. There is a liquid beauty in the rising sun. There is a royal splendor in its midday blaze. And there is also an exquisite grace in its setting glow. So it is with the life of a great man. There is sweetness in its childhood and adolescence. There is resplendence in its maturity. And again, there's a deep pathos in its last days. So I think really we can also get tremendous inspiration, and we can learn so much about the mystery, hidden purpose of the life of a great soul like Sri Ramakrishna. So let me close with a prayer. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinas sarve santu niramaya sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschid dukha bhag bhavet. Om shanti shanti shanti. May all beings be happy. May all be free from disease. May no one get sick. Everyone be very careful. May everyone experience only good things in their lives. And may none suffer from misery. Om peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thank you.